The morning sun barely pierced through the thick London clouds as James Mitchell adjusted his security earpiece for what seemed like the 100th time that day. He had been working palace security for nearly 15 years, but days like these still made his pulse quicken. The royal family's movements through public spaces always required heightened vigilance, and Heathrow Airport presented unique challenges with its constant flow of travelers and multiple entry points. James stood at his designated post near the VIP entrance, his trained eyes scanning every face, every movement, every potential threat. The radio crackled with updates from his team members positioned throughout the terminal. Today's assignment involved coordinating security for multiple royal movements, and the complexity of managing overlapping schedules had everyone on edge. Meanwhile, in a black Range Rover approaching the airport, Camilla, the Queen consort, reviewed her itinerary with her private secretary. She was scheduled for a brief stopover before continuing to a Commonwealth engagement. The vehicle moved smoothly through the morning traffic, her security detail maintaining perfect formation around her motorcade. She appreciated the dedication of her protection officers but sometimes yearned for the simpler days when travel didn't require such elaborate coordination. Unknown to Camilla, young Princess Charlotte was also at Heathrow that morning with her own security detail. The 8-year-old was returning from a school trip, carefully supervised but traveling through regular channels to maintain a sense of normalcy in her life. Her parents, William and Catherine, believed strongly in giving their children as normal an upbringing as possible within the constraints of royal life. The security protocol at Heathrow had been meticulously planned, weeks in advance. Every corridor, every possible route, had been mapped and secured. The airport security worked in close coordination with royal protection officers, but the sheer size of Heathrow and the number of daily travelers made it an ongoing challenge. James Mitchell had participated in countless security briefings, studying photographs of every royal family member, their staff, and approved companions until he could recognize them instantly. As Camilla's motorcade entered the airport grounds through a discreet entrance, the security machine kicked into higher gear. Radio communications increased, positions were confirmed, and alternate routes were kept clear. The goal was always to move the principals quickly and safely, while attracting minimal attention from the public. The Queen Consort's team had perfected this dance over many years of service. Inside the terminal, Princess Charlotte's group was making their way through a different section entirely. Her young classmates chattered excitedly about their trip, blissfully unaware of the discreet security presence surrounding them. Charlotte, wise beyond her years, understood the necessity of the protection but tried her best to blend in with her friends. Her security officers, dressed in civilian clothes, maintained careful watch while appearing to be just another group of adults accompanying schoolchildren. The convergence of these two royal presences in the same location was not unprecedented, but it required exceptional coordination. The security teams had to ensure that neither party's movements interfered with the other, while maintaining the highest level of protection for both. This delicate balance often led to split-second decisions and rapid adjustments to planned routes. James Mitchell received an update through his earpiece that Camilla's party was approaching his sector. He straightened his tie and mentally reviewed the identification protocols. Even though he had seen the Queen Consort numerous times before, protocol demanded that every interaction follow strict procedures. These rules existed for good reason. In the world of royal security, assumptions could prove dangerous. The morning had started routinely for Sarah Chen, one of the airport's senior security supervisors. She had been briefed about the royal movements, but was focused on maintaining normal airport operations while accommodating the special requirements. Her team had to balance the needs of thousands of regular travelers with the security demands of protecting members of the royal family. It was a task that required diplomatic skills as much as security expertise. As fate would have it, a minor communication glitch occurred just as Camilla's party was transitioning between secure areas. A new security officer, eager but inexperienced, had misunderstood a radio transmission about route changes. This small error would soon create a moment of confusion that would test the entire security apparatus. The Queen Consort moved with practiced grace through the airport corridors, accompanied by her ladies-in-waiting and protection officers. She had learned over the years to maintain a pleasant demeanor, even during the most tedious security procedures. Her staff worked diligently to smooth her path, handling luggage and documentation while she focused on the upcoming engagement. Charlotte's group, meanwhile, was approaching the main security checkpoint from another direction. The young princess walked between two classmates, discussing their favorite moments from the trip. Her ability to compartmentalize her royal identity and simply be a schoolgirl impressed her teachers, who had initially been nervous about having such a high-profile student on the trip. The Heathrow security system operated on multiple levels, with various agencies working in concert. The airport's own security force coordinated with Metropolitan Police, Royal Protection Services, and intelligence agencies to create an invisible but impenetrable shield around the royals. This multi-layered approach had been refined over decades and had proven effective in countless situations. James Mitchell noticed increased radio chatter and sensed that something was slightly off in the usual rhythm of operations. His years of experience had taught him to trust these instincts. He discreetly adjusted his position to get a better view of the approaching corridor while maintaining his post. The ability to adapt quickly while following protocol was what distinguished exceptional security officers from merely good ones. The human element in security work could never be entirely eliminated by technology or procedures. Despite advanced surveillance systems, encrypted communications, and detailed protocols, it often came down to individual officers making split-second decisions based on training and instinct. This reality both challenged and motivated professionals like James, who understood that they formed the last line of defense. As the morning progressed, the carefully choreographed movements of both royal parties continued through the airport. Neither Camilla nor Charlotte was aware of the other's presence, each focused on their own journey. The security teams, however, were acutely aware of the complexity they were managing. Every door, every corner, every interaction was monitored and assessed for potential risks. The incident that would soon unfold would highlight both the strengths and vulnerabilities of even the most sophisticated security operations. It would become a teaching moment for security services and a reminder that constant vigilance and adaptability were essential when protecting the royal family. The stage was set for a confrontation that nobody had anticipated but everyone would learn from. The confusion began when Camilla's party took an unexpected turn. Construction work in one section of the terminal had necessitated a last-minute route change that hadn't been properly communicated to all security checkpoints. The Queen Consort's protection officers smoothly redirected their principal through an alternate corridor, confident that their colleagues ahead had been notified. However, the message had been garbled in transmission, leaving James Mitchell and his checkpoint team expecting the royal party from an entirely different direction. As Camilla approached the security checkpoint, she noticed a young officer who seemed uncertain. She had developed a keen sense for reading people after years in the public eye, and something in his body language suggested confusion rather than the usual professional alertness. Her protection officer, David Hartley, also sensed the irregularity and moved slightly closer to her side. James Mitchell looked up from checking his tablet to see an elegant woman approaching with what appeared to be a security detail. However, she was coming from the wrong direction, and his briefing materials had indicated the royal party would arrive at least 10 minutes later. His training kicked in immediately. When in doubt, follow protocol to the letter. He stepped forward, raising his hand in a polite but firm gesture to stop the approaching group. "Good morning, ma'am. I'll need to see identification before you proceed," James said with professional courtesy. The words had barely left his mouth when he noticed the distinctive brooch on the woman's lapel, one he had seen in countless security briefings. His heart rate spiked as he realized he might have just stopped the Queen Consort herself. David Hartley immediately moved to intervene, reaching for his credentials. "Officer, this is Her Majesty, the Queen Consort. We have clearance through this checkpoint." His tone was controlled but carried an edge of authority that came from years of protecting senior royals. The situation grew more complex as Charlotte's group unexpectedly appeared around a corner, having also been rerouted due to the construction. The young princess noticed the commotion ahead and recognized her step-grandmother immediately. Her security detail quickly assessed the situation, realizing they had inadvertently walked into a sensitive security moment. James Mitchell found himself at the center of an unprecedented situation. Protocol demanded that he verify all identities, regardless of who someone claimed to be. Yet he was now facing what appeared to be not one but two members of the royal family, neither arriving as scheduled or from the expected direction. His supervisor, Sarah Chen, was already moving toward the checkpoint, alerted by the unusual delay. Camilla, ever gracious, understood the officer's dilemma. She had spent enough time around security personnel to know that they faced impossible choices daily. Follow protocol rigidly and risk offending those they were meant to protect, or bend rules and potentially create vulnerabilities. She smiled warmly at James, a gesture meant to ease the tension she could see building in his shoulders. "Officer, you're absolutely right to check," Camilla said calmly. "I appreciate your diligence." Her words had an immediate effect, transforming what could have been an embarrassing confrontation into a moment of mutual respect. This was the kind of emotional intelligence that had served her well throughout her public life. Charlotte's protective detail had quickly formed a discreet barrier, keeping the young princess and her classmates at a safe distance, while the situation resolved. However, Charlotte, displaying the curiosity natural to her age, was craning her neck to see what was happening. She whispered to her closest security officer, asking if everything was all right. Sarah Chen arrived at the checkpoint just as David Hartley was producing his identification and authorization documents. She immediately recognized the delicate nature of the situation. A security officer doing his job properly had inadvertently created a bottleneck involving two royal principals. Her priority was to resolve the situation quickly while maintaining security integrity and avoiding any embarrassment to the royal family. The documentation was quickly verified, and James Mitchell felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment wash over him. He had done exactly what his training demanded, but stopping the Queen Consort was not something any security officer wanted on their record. However, Camilla's next actions would turn this potentially career-damaging moment into something quite different. "What's your name, officer?" Camilla asked, genuinely interested. When James identified himself, she continued, "Mr. Mitchell, you've done exactly what you should have done. I would be concerned if you hadn't stopped us, arriving from an unexpected direction. Security is only as strong as officers like you, who follow protocol even when it might be uncomfortable." This interaction was witnessed by Charlotte, who was taking mental notes as she always did when observing how senior royals handled challenging situations. Her parents had taught her that being royal meant understanding the pressures faced by those who served them, and here was a perfect example of grace under pressure from both sides. Sarah Chen quickly coordinated with both security teams to establish a clear path forward. The construction-related changes that had caused the confusion were immediately communicated to all checkpoints to prevent similar incidents. She also made a mental note to review communication protocols to ensure such garbled messages didn't occur again. David Hartley, while initially frustrated by the delay, found himself impressed by James Mitchell's professionalism. In his years of protecting royals, he had seen security officers who were either too rigid or too deferential. Mitchell had found the right balance, firm in his duty but respectful in his manner. It was exactly the kind of officer they needed more of in royal protection. The young princess's teacher, unaware of the full significance of what was happening ahead, was trying to keep the children organized and quiet. She sensed this was some kind of security matter, and trusted that Charlotte's protection officers would handle whatever was occurring. The other children, typical of their age, were more interested in discussing what snacks might be available on their connecting flight. As the checkpoint was cleared for Camilla to proceed, she made one more gesture that would be remembered by everyone present. She turned to James Mitchell and said, "Would you please ensure that Princess Charlotte and her group pass through smoothly when they reach your checkpoint? I believe they're just behind us." This simple acknowledgement that she had noticed her step-granddaughter's presence while handling her own security issue demonstrated the awareness and consideration that marked true leadership. James Mitchell nodded, now fully understanding the complexity of the situation he had been managing. Two royal parties, construction-related route changes, and communication failures had created a perfect storm of confusion. Yet the professionalism of everyone involved had prevented it from becoming a security incident or public embarrassment. Charlotte's security detail appreciated Camilla's intervention, as it smoothed their own passage through the checkpoint. When the young princess's group reached James Mitchell a few minutes later, he was ready with a warm but professional greeting. Charlotte, showing maturity beyond her years, thanked him politely as she passed through. Having learned from watching Camilla that acknowledging those who served them was not just good manners but essential leadership. The incident began to wind down as both royal parties continued to their respective destinations within the airport. However, the ripple effects were already spreading through the security apparatus. Radio chatter increased as supervisors ensured all teams were updated on the changed routes and actual positions of their principals. Sarah Chen was already composing her incident report in her head. While nothing serious had occurred, the confusion highlighted areas for improvement in their communication systems and protocol flexibility. She made a note to commend James Mitchell for his adherence to protocol while managing a sensitive situation with diplomacy. The broader implications of the incident were not lost on the senior security officials monitoring from the command center. They had observed everything through security cameras and radio communications. The fact that two royal movements had nearly intersected due to simple construction work and a communication error would require a thorough review of their procedures. For James Mitchell, the remainder of his shift passed in a blur of routine checks and standard procedures. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just experienced something significant. The Queen Consort's gracious handling of his challenge had reinforced why the security services worked so hard to protect the royal family. They were not just symbols, but real people who understood and appreciated the difficult job of keeping them safe. As Camilla settled into the VIP lounge before her flight, she mentioned the incident to her private secretary. "Make a note about Officer Mitchell," she said. "That's exactly the kind of vigilance we need. Perhaps a commendation letter would be appropriate." Her ability to turn a potentially negative encounter into a positive reinforcement of good security practices was characteristic of her approach to royal duties. Charlotte, meanwhile, was excitedly telling her favorite teacher about seeing her Gongon Camilla at the airport. The teacher, finally understanding what the earlier commotion had been about, marveled at how casually the young princess spoke about encounters that would be extraordinary for anyone else. It was a reminder of the unique world these children inhabited, where high security and royal protocol were simply part of daily life. The security teams began their debriefs while the principals were safely in their respective waiting areas. Both David Hartley and Charlotte's lead protection officer compared notes on how the situation had unfolded and what lessons could be learned. They agreed that James Mitchell had handled the situation exemplarily and that the Queen Consort's response had been pitch perfect in diffusing any tension. Word of the incident spread quickly through the security community at Heathrow. It became an immediate teaching moment, an example of how proper protocol, professional conduct, and gracious leadership could turn a potentially embarrassing situation into a validation of the security system's effectiveness. Junior officers would study this incident in training sessions for years to come. As the morning progressed toward noon, both royal parties prepared for their onward journeys. The airport had returned to its normal rhythm, with thousands of travelers passing through unaware of the small drama that had played out in their midst. This was exactly as it should be. Good security was invisible to those it wasn't protecting, while remaining vigilantly visible to those who might pose a threat. The incident report that Sarah Chen filed later that day would make its way up the chain of command, eventually reaching the highest levels of royal security. It would prompt a review of communication protocols and route planning procedures, leading to improvements that would benefit future operations. But it would also be noted as an example of how well-trained personnel could manage unexpected situations with professionalism and grace. For all involved, the morning had provided a reminder of the constant balancing act required in royal security. Maintaining strict protocols while adapting to changing circumstances, showing appropriate deference while never compromising safety, and managing complex logistics while making it all appear seamless to the public. It was a challenge that required the very best from everyone involved, from senior officials to frontline officers like James Mitchell. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as both royal parties prepared for their departures. The morning's incident had already become part of the institutional memory of the Royal Protection Services, but its immediate effects were still rippling through the security apparatus. In the command center, senior officials were conducting a real-time analysis of what had occurred, identifying both the strengths displayed and the vulnerabilities exposed. James Mitchell had been quietly relieved from his checkpoint duties and asked to provide a detailed statement about the incident. As he sat in the security office, carefully documenting every moment of the encounter, He reflected on how differently things could have gone. The Queen Consort's gracious response had transformed what could have been a career-ending moment into what his supervisor was already calling textbook security protocol execution. Unknown to James, Camilla had indeed followed through on her intention to recognize his diligence. Her private secretary had already drafted a letter of commendation that would eventually make its way through official channels. In the world of royal service, such recognition was rare and highly valued. It would mark James Mitchell as an officer who had been tested in a real situation and had performed exemplarily. Charlotte's flight had departed first, the young princess waving goodbye to her teachers and classmates as she boarded with her family's characteristic poise. Her security detail had breathed a collective sigh of relief once she was safely airborne. The morning's unexpected encounter had added an extra layer of complexity to what should have been a routine school trip return. But it had also provided valuable lessons for everyone involved. In the VIP lounge, Camilla was briefing her team about an adjustment to their arrival protocol at their destination. The morning's confusion had reminded her of the importance of clear communication at every level of an operation. She suggested that perhaps they should institute a double confirmation system for any route changes, no matter how minor they might seem. Her staff took careful notes, knowing that suggestions from the Queen Consort carried significant weight in shaping future procedures. The wider implications of the incident were already being discussed at the highest levels of royal security. The fact that two members of the royal family had been in the same location without planned coordination highlighted the need for better integration of scheduling systems. While their movements were tracked meticulously, the systems for different members of the family didn't always communicate effectively with each other. Sarah Chen found herself in a conference call with senior security officials from Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, and the Metropolitan Police. They were conducting a preliminary review of the morning's events. Not because anything had gone seriously wrong, but because the potential for problems had been evident. This proactive approach to security management was what kept the royal family safe in an increasingly complex world. The discussion revealed that the construction work that had triggered the route change had been scheduled months in advance, but had somehow not been integrated into the royal movement planning for that day. It was a reminder that even the most sophisticated security operations were only as strong as their information gathering and communication systems. Plans were immediately put in place to improve coordination with airport authorities about any physical changes to the terminal. As Camilla's aircraft lifted off from Heathrow, she gazed out at the sprawling airport below and thought about the thousands of people working to keep it running smoothly. The incident with Officer Mitchell had reinforced her appreciation for those who served without recognition, doing their jobs professionally day after day. She made a mental note to mention this in her next conversation with the king, knowing he shared her respect for the security services. Back at Heathrow, James Mitchell's shift was ending, but he found himself reluctant to leave. His colleagues had been approaching him throughout the day, wanting to hear firsthand about his encounter with the Queen Consort. He was careful to maintain professional discretion while sharing what he could about the experience. The security community was tight-knit, and stories like these became part of their collective wisdom. The incident had also caught the attention of the media, though the details remained closely guarded. A few passengers had noticed the unusual security activity, and social media posts had speculated about a royal near-miss at Heathrow. The palace communications team was monitoring the situation but had decided that no official statement was necessary. The security services had functioned as designed, and there was no benefit to drawing attention to the minor confusion. In her office, Sarah Chen was finalizing her comprehensive report on the incident. She highlighted several key lessons: the importance of redundant communication systems, the need for better integration of scheduling databases, and the value of officers who followed protocol, even in uncertain situations. She also noted the exemplary conduct of all parties involved, from James Mitchell's professional challenge to Camilla's gracious response and the smooth coordination between different security teams. The training implications of the incident were already being incorporated into security protocols. New officers would study this case as an example of how to handle uncertainty when dealing with high-profile principals. The emphasis would be on maintaining security standards while showing appropriate respect and flexibility. It was a delicate balance that couldn't be taught through manuals alone but required real-world examples. As evening approached, The various parties involved in the morning's drama were scattered across the globe. Charlotte was safely back with her family, excitedly recounting her school trip adventures. Camilla was preparing for her Commonwealth engagement, the morning's incident already compartmentalized as she focused on her duties ahead. And James Mitchell was at home, still processing the day's events, and unaware that a royal commendation was making its way through the system toward him. The long-term effects of the incident would be felt for years to come. Security protocols were updated, communication systems were improved, and training programs were enhanced. But perhaps most importantly, it had demonstrated that even in moments of confusion or potential conflict, professionalism, respect, and grace could prevail. The human element in security, the judgment, adaptability, and interpersonal skills of individual officers, had proven to be as important as any technology or protocol. For the Royal Protection Services, the incident became known informally as the Heathrow teaching moment. It was referenced in training sessions, discussed in security conferences, and used as an example of how proper preparation and professional conduct could turn potential problems into opportunities for system improvement. The fact that it involved 2 generations of the royal family added an extra dimension to its significance. James Mitchell's career received an unexpected boost from the incident. The commendation letter from Camilla, when it arrived weeks later, was framed and displayed in the security office as an inspiration to other officers. James himself was promoted within the year and became a training instructor, using his experience to teach new officers about the importance of maintaining standards while showing appropriate flexibility. The relationship between the royal family and their security services was strengthened by the incident. It demonstrated that the royals understood and appreciated the difficult decisions security officers faced daily. Camilla's response had shown that the royal family saw their protection officers not as mere functionaries, but as professionals, deserving of respect and recognition for their vital work. In the months that followed, the improved communication protocols prevented several potential scheduling conflicts. The integration of construction and maintenance schedules with royal movement planning became standard practice, not just at Heathrow but at all major venues frequented by the royal family. What had started as a moment of confusion had led to systematic improvements that enhanced security for years to come. The story of the Heathrow incident entered the unofficial mythology of royal security, told and retold with various embellishments over the years. But at its core, it remained a simple tale of professionals doing their jobs under challenging circumstances and leaders showing grace under pressure. It reminded everyone involved that behind the pageantry and protocol of royal life were real people, both those being protected and those doing the protecting, trying to navigate complex situations with dignity and professionalism. For Princess Charlotte, the incident became part of her education in royal life. Years later, she would remember watching Camilla handle the situation with grace and James Mitchell maintaining his professional standards despite the pressure. These lessons, absorbed through observation rather than formal instruction, would shape her own approach to royal duties when her time came. The final report on the incident, classified and filed in the archives of royal security, concluded that while minor failures in communication had created the potential for confusion, the professionalism and training of all personnel involved had prevented any security compromise or public embarrassment. It noted that the incident had actually strengthened security by identifying areas for improvement and demonstrating the effectiveness of existing protocols. As the sun set on that eventful day at Heathrow, the airport continued its ceaseless operations. Thousands of passengers passed through the same checkpoint where James Mitchell had challenged the Queen Consort, unaware of the small piece of history that had unfolded there. But for those who had been involved, it was a day that reinforced the importance of their work and the values that underpinned it: vigilance, professionalism, respect, and grace under pressure. The Heathrow incident would be remembered not for what went wrong, but for what went right. In a world where security failures made headlines, this was a story of success, of systems that worked, people who performed their duties with distinction, and leaders who understood the value of those who served them. It was, in many ways, a perfect example of how the ancient institution of monarchy could function effectively in the modern world, adapting to contemporary challenges while maintaining its essential dignity and purpose. Years later, when James Mitchell retired from the security services, the framed commendation from Camilla held pride of place among his memorabilia. He would tell his grandchildren about the day he stopped the Queen Consort at Heathrow, not as a boast, but as a lesson in doing one's duty regardless of the circumstances. And in the telling, he would always emphasize not his own actions but Camilla's gracious response. A reminder that true leadership was shown not in never being challenged but in how one responded to challenges with wisdom, humor, and grace.